Okay, this is your 1-minute warm-up for your 225 Q&A. Ready? Your name is Steve Reynolds?
That's correct.
And Steve, do you live in Georgetown?
Yes, sir.
And where do you work?
I work at Parker Munn Ford.
And what is your position at Parker Munn Ford?
The assistant service manager.
Assistant service manager?
Yes, sir.
And how long have you been assistant service manager?
Just a short amount of time.
And how long have you done this type of work?
I came with Parker Munn Ford in June of '73. I've done this type of work since 1963.
And what does your job entail? I mean, what do you do as a part of your job?
Service and body shop manager.
Do you make estimates or appraisals of wrecked cars, damaged cars as part of your work?
Yes, sir, I do.
Do you know the Ranchero that was sold by Parker Munn Ford, then Port City Ford, to Mr. Sox?
Yes, sir.
Did you go to the scene of the accident upon being called by Mr. Sox?
Yes, sir, I did. My body shop man that runs the wrecker, he went first, and then he called me to come assist him at the scene of the accident.
Did you inspect the car and also the trailer at that time?
No, sir,
Okay, and your 225 Q&A mock, your proper names are Dan Moreno, City of Dallas, Southwest Patrol Division, Hortense, Officer Kevin Watts, Officer Watts, Officer Charles Rains, States Exhibit number 5, Larry Baker, Officer Rains, and Mr. Ward. This is your 225 Q&A mock for 5 minutes. Ready? State your name for this jury.
Dan Moreno.
And for the record, would you spell your last name?
Moreno.
And you are a police officer for the City of Dallas?
Yes, sir, I am.
What division are you assigned to?
Southwest Patrol Division.
What are your duties with the Southwest Patrol Division?
I am a patrol officer and field training officer.
Were you working as a patrol officer on the day of October 3rd, 1991?
Yes, at the time I didn't have a rookie.
Turning your attention to October the 3rd, 1991, were you on duty at approximately 12 noon?
Yes, sir, I was.
And roughly after 12 noon, did you respond to a shooting call?
Yes, I did.
And what did you do when you arrived at the scene, officer?
Immediately when I came down the road of 1600 Hortense, I shut down my emergency lights and siren, and I observed my cover element, Officer Kevin Watts, already on the scene, and he was waving his arm at me so I could go and stop my vehicle, since the complainant who was shot at the time was laying in the middle of the street.
And what happened after that?
I exited my patrol vehicle and I ran up to the complainant, and Officer Watts and myself were trying to determine what had happened from him.
Did the complainant tell you what had happened?
He said he was shot by someone from a yellow house up the street.
Okay. Did he point out the house to you?
At the time, I don't remember him being able to point it out to me. He was in such great pain, and I asked him to try and turn over because he was on his stomach. And I tried to get him to turn over, and I could see the extent of his injuries.
Was there quite a bit of blood, officer?
Yes, sir, quite a bit.
What is the next thing you remember happening after you were asking him to turn over?
At that time, people started to come out of their houses to see what was happening. The witnesses who had originally called us had begun to come out of their house. I got on the police radio and called for an ambulance or made sure we had one coming.
How long did it take the ambulance to get there?
An ambulance was dispatched automatically when the call came out, so they were there within about 3 or 4 minutes after we arrived on the scene.
Were you already on the scene, officer, when the victim's sister came out?
Yes, sir, I was.
And did you see her when she came out of her house?
Yes, I did.
After the ambulance arrived, did you do anything further?
After the ambulance arrived, the sister came out and she asked several questions of the complainant, and based on what he told her and the fact that he mentioned a yellow house, I tried to get a cover element, Officer Charles Rains, to come over us. That way we would go and knock on the door of the yellow house.
Why did you feel that you needed a cover element?
Well, at the time, the complainant had stated something about a rifle, and my first instinct was a shot from a yellow house up the street, possibly a sniper incident. And the last thing I wanted to do was to be exposed to any high-powered rifle fire.
Officer, referring to the State's Exhibit number 5, is this the house that you were concerned about?
Yes, sir, it is.
At this point, while you were waiting for your cover element to come out, had the defendant come out of his house?
No, he had not.
Did the defendant come out of his house after your cover element arrived?
Yes.
And what happened when he came out of his house?
As soon as we heard, we looked up and saw the door opening and him stepping out through the doorway. I alerted my cover element, Officer Kevin Watts. Because the ambulance crew was working on the man. There was nothing we could do physically for him. Our immediate attention was drawn to the defendant, and Officer Watts and myself began approaching him.
And what happened next?
As we approached him, we started pulling our weapons out of our holsters because we weren't sure whether he was armed or not. As we got within 10 or 15 feet of him, he made a statement to me.
Okay, and what was that statement?
Yes, yeah, I shot him after he shot at me first.
And had you said anything to him before that?
No, sir.
After he told you that he had shot the victim, what did you do?
We pretty much knew this was a serious offense and we didn't want to mess up the case. So what we did, we immediately secured him by handcuffing and patting him down for weapons, and then took him to an area away from the family members of the complainant and away from any witnesses. We, Officer Watts and myself, took him to Officer Watts's car, where he was immediately read his rights and not asked any questions.
Did you look to see if there was another handgun involved?
Yes, sir, we did.
Did you check the victim, Larry Baker, to see if he had a handgun on him?
From the statement that was made by the defendant that the complainant shot at him first, we took it upon ourselves to go ahead and search the complainant. Officer Raines entered the ambulance and did an immediate search of the complainant while the paramedics were working on him.
During this time, were you also trying to, for a lack of a better word, sterilize the crime scene?
Yes, I was.
Okay, was there any other civilians around in the crime scene?
There was one individual that came out. He walked up within about 10 minutes after we took Mr. Ward into custody, and we weren't sure who he was. We thought he might be a family member of the complainant at first, and since this individual was shot, we really didn't want to make the family members leave because we weren't sure of the extent of the injuries of the person.
What was this individual doing?
He was walking around like he pretty much owned the place, like he had a right to be there. We weren't sure whether he was a family member or an off-duty police officer. That was my opinion on that.
And did you ask him to leave the crime scene? Good luck.